Hi everyone, Jared here. Time for the market video update. Pretty interesting day in the market today. We saw that everything was pretty flat this morning, and then later morning we saw some decent runs. The Dow ended up finishing about 60 points up. S&P made it through 1400. That was pretty significant. Gold has recovered quite a bit. Still not compared to the drop that it's had over the last several days, but it's up a bit. And oil's kind of just for the most part pretty flat. As far as news goes, we saw a couple of news announcements come out. We saw some positive U.S. news, better than expected unemployment claims, so smaller numbers there. We saw larger numbers on investors that foreign investors buying local securities and equities and so on, and we saw that number be about 101 billion as opposed to about 39 that was looked for. So that's pretty significant. And then the Philly Fed index was just a little bit better as well. Dollar index right here has kind of been bouncing around. We see that it's kind of stuck at about 80.60, made it all the way down just below 80.40. You can see a little bit of a trend line there, so I'd like to get it above about 80.70 probably to really get 70, 80, somewhere in that general area to really get that upside movement. So we're going to keep an eye on that. So looking at the charts here, we talked about this. This trend line is from yesterday, and we talked about the market maybe bottoming out here, having trouble getting much lower, and breaking through that trend line. And breakthrough it did. We saw about an 80 pip run up, right up to about 131.20, and it just kind of hit this area, which happens to be the gap, which happens to be the 200-day, or excuse me, the 100-day moving average. So both of these levels kind of stop the market, not to mention the daily pivot, not to mention some other resistance here. You can see that this level is pretty significant all the way across the board. So the market was kind of stopped dead in its tracks right there. And we saw this run kind of halted there, and it's off that level by about 40 pips now. So I'm going to be looking at a couple of things. The euro, unfortunately, I've got all this text here cluttering everything, but you can kind of get the idea that there's this channel right here, which is a smaller, shorter term channel. The euro broke out of that, retraced back into the channel almost, and then it's quite a bit outside of the channel. Pretty well confirmed there. So what that puts us in is a very nice confirmation that it's probably going to stay in this channel right here. So this area right here is very much in play, and the euro is going to have to get to and below 130 and then ultimately 129.70, 70.80, because that's going to be the next major area of support. And we got to get the euro through that low. If we do, we should be able to see some very nice runs on down there. And so I'm going to be watching for that and ready for some movement down below that. But we've got to make the breaks first. You can see here on the 4-hour chart that it's staying below our moving averages. We had a little bit of a run up there, but it's all the way back down, and it's been staying below for this entire week. Ran up just about to that moving average and came back down. So the euro is really kind of staying kind of bearish, but in recovery mode. So I'm not going to do any wild guessing. We know that the daily chart is looking bearish still, but we also know that that we've got two levels to watch. And the first level is the high here, this 131.20. If the euro breaks above this, we could see 13200 very easily and very likely, and we could also see even bigger, newer highs. So that's one thing to keep a really close eye on. So if this breaks above 131.20, probably going to see a bit of a run there. Likewise, if it's able to kind of continue and consolidate through this trend line, I'm starting to look at kind of a 130.70, 60.70 area. It's sitting about 130.80, but if it can kind of consolidate through that, I think we might have a short-term dip on this euro, and we might be able to get a couple of pips on the downside. So I'm going to be watching for that downside movement on the euro and see if we can get this thing to run down just a little bit below those kind of 130.70s. That should turn out to be a nice little area, and there should be and potentially is some pretty good pips on a run like that. So we're just going to watch this 131.20 or kind of this 130.70 area for a continuation right back down. You can see on the smaller time frames, like on the 15-minute chart, pretty nice little trend line. It's crossing over here, and if we can get it kind of below that that area, then we should start to see some pretty good downside movement. So keep an eye on that. Pound dollar has kind of been interesting. I didn't even put any levels on this pound dollar because the darn thing is just so choppy. And this could be a number of things happening here. And honestly, I'm not even going to guess which one it is. I'm just going to wait for the levels to be worked. 156.50 turned out to be a very strong level, but the market got below it and then up above and below and big above and tested it and bounced off it and below and back up above again. So there's kind of a lot of things to look at. And one of those things is, number one, this high right here. Obviously, that's pretty significant. About 157, 157.50-ish area has really kind of been holding the market in play here. But we see that the pound dollar bounced up and it's kind of tested this gap a couple of times, and it got above the gap and it stopped here at the 200-day moving average, and just kind of is having trouble getting above these highs. So if it does get above 157.50, then there's going to be some bigger buying opportunities, and I think the pound could be headed up, maybe into some major levels there. We do have a 4-hour crossover. We have what looks like a decently strong double bottom here and lots of support. So this pound could be headed higher. And that's one thing we got to keep an eye on. You can see on the daily chart here that it's staying below this whole area in our bigger downward channel, but it's having trouble with this. This is really big support right here. This is 15600, 156.50, and the market's really had a hard time right there. So it's getting choppy and messy, but if it can get back down below that, we're in good shape. But again, back up above this 157.50, we could see runs all the way up into this trend line area and up into this channel, which could be about 158.50. So there's plenty of upside potential there. But so far, it's still kind of making these lower lows. It's just starting to. It looks like it's just finding a lot of consolidation here, which would lead me to believe that this might be ready to head up just a little bit. But we're going to watch it below 157.50. We're going to assume that it's bearish. Above that, it's bullish. And so look for some little short-term trend lines. You can see on these smaller time frames that there's a few things to look at. Here's our 5-minute chart. It's kind of already broken that shorter term one, and it's making a little bit of a move down. But likewise, there's also some of these guys that are worth keeping an eye on as well, some of these shorter term trend lines. And if it makes a run above that, we could see some movements. But again, I think the more important thing on this pound dollar is going to be the big picture. Above 157.50, bullish. Below about 156. If it gets back below 156.50, I think it's going to go, and I think it's going to go big and be able to get through those levels. So we're just going to have to kind of watch and wait and see where things go. Aussie dollar is kind of the same type of situation as this euro dollar. We talked about, if you look at the daily chart, here is our big support right here that we're still waiting for, 103.80, and it got pretty close. Some of the lows of these candles right here, you can see the low here is about 104.25, 27, right in that general area. So I'm looking at this Aussie dollar, and I'm waiting to see, first of all, we have no crossover there, and we've got this weekly high that it keeps kind of messing with. So it's hit that weekly high a couple of times, and it makes these big dips down, and it's back up to that weekly high. But once again, staying below the big long-term moving averages, the gap, and this is also the 100-day moving average, and then it's just hit that weekly high, which is about 105.60. So above this, I think there's buying opportunity like crazy. Below this, I think we're going to see some breakouts and some continuations down, and I kind of like, you can see that it's currently trading about 105.30, and I think maybe 105.10, somewhere in there, could start to give us a little bit of selling pressure and a little bit of confirmation on that breakout. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on that. So again, we're just going to wait for the levels, like on the pound dollar, like on the euro dollar, and the Aussie dollar is no different. 105.10 and even 105.100 or 105.60. Above or below, buy or sell. Simple as that. The gold here has had a very dramatic run down over only the last several days here, this week. It's had a big rundown. Now here's the fib level on gold here, and this is probably a very short time frame, but I still think it's got some importance to it. So gold made this big run down, and then it's retraced back up to the 38% fib, which is about 1665-ish, and it got just a little bit above that, and it's starting to kind of soften up. So gold could be headed back down as well, or if it breaks this 38, if it gets back up above about 1665, then I think we're at least headed into that 50% fib and into that 1 hour gap there, which is over 100 pips. So there's lots of movement there just above that 38% fib. So keep an eye on that. And on the shorter time frames, you can kind of look for some breakouts of trend lines here. You can see on this 5-minute chart there might be a short-term kind of gold entry there. That's a pretty good looking trend line right there, but we've also got this guy, so just kind of keep an eye on some of these. I think gold might get a little bit interesting, maybe below about 1653 or so, right in that general area. And you can see it's just a couple of pips off that, so more down kind of just below that area. We might have some nice selling opportunities on gold, so we're going to keep an eye on that. So lots of things to look at. The market market's moving like crazy, and we've got, just some waiting and seeing to see what happens here. Are these levels going to break, or are they going to be able to hold? So I'll keep you guys updated in the chat. We'll have some more trades coming out. We had some nice profits last night for the UK session once again, and some good profits for the US session this morning. So we're just cranking through, and everything's looking great. And I'll have more updates in the chat and in the notes coming up. Thanks a bunch, everyone.